There's no such thing as perfect murder. The Robert Durst saga, the confession that shook America. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course. Picture this scene. March 14, 2015, Los Angeles. Inside a luxury hotel bathroom, a 70 billionaire stands alone, staring at himself in the mirror. His thin lips move, whispering words meant for no one. What he doesn't know is that the wireless microphone clipped to his expensive shirt is still transmitting. Every word, every breath, every damning syllable is being recorded. This ain't some Hollywood thriller, folks. This is the real-life story of Robert Durst, a man born into American royalty, heir to a real estate empire worth billions, who thought money could wash away blood. For 4 decades, he danced with death and walked away clean. 3 murders, 3 states, 3 different versions of the same lie. But in that bathroom, in those 8 whispered words, the mask finally slipped. The monster showed his face. And America was listening. Buckle up, people. This ride's gonna take us through the darkest corners of privilege, power, and pure evil. This is the story of how one man's wealth became his weapon, how justice got played for a fool, and how in the end a killer's own ego brought him down. Welcome to the twisted world of Robert Durst, a boy who watched his mother fall when paradise turns to hell. The making of a monster. To understand Robert Durst, you gotta understand where he came from. And I'm not just talking about money, though Lord knows there was plenty of that. I'm talking about the kind of childhood that creates monsters. The year was 1943. Franklin Roosevelt was president. World War II was raging. And in Manhattan, Seymour Durst was building an empire. The Durst organization wasn't just some real estate company, it was a kingdom. By the time little Bobby was born, his family owned chunks of New York that most people only dream about. We're talking Times Square. We're talking Fifth Avenue. We're talking about the kind of money where you don't just own buildings, you own entire city blocks. The Durst family lived in Scarsdale, in a mansion that looked like something out of The Great Gatsby. 27 rooms, servants, grounds that went on forever. Little Bobby and his 3 siblings, Douglas, Wendy, and Tommy, should have been living a fairy tale. But fairy tales got monsters too, don't they? Bernice Durst was beautiful in that 1950s way, perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect wife. But behind closed doors, something was eating her alive. Depression, they'd call it now. Back then, they just said she was delicate. She'd disappear into her room for days. She'd stare out windows like she was looking for an escape route. Then came that night in 1950. Robert was 7 years old. October, leaves falling. The kind of crisp New York evening where normal families are inside having dinner. But at the Durst mansion, something terrible was unfolding. Different people tell different stories about what happened. The official report says Bernice either fell or jumped from the roof, but Robert told people his father made him watch. If him stand there and watch as his mother stood on that roof edge. Made him watch as she fell. Can you imagine that? 7 years old, watching your mother plummet through the darkness. The sound she must have made when she hit the ground. The way the moonlight must have caught her body. All wrong angles and spreading blood. Before we dive deeper into this nightmare, make sure you're subscribed to Justice System USA. Hit that notification bell, cause we're about to explore how this tragedy created one of America's most cunning killers. Trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. Asterisk. Seymour Durst was ice cold about the whole thing. No grieving period, no therapy for the kids. Hell, he remarried within the year. Some young thing who didn't ask questions about the first wife. Life went on. Business went on. Money kept rolling in. But little Bobby, something inside that kid broke that night and never healed his siblings. They found ways to cope. Douglas threw himself into the family business. Wendy and Tommy built their own lives, their own families. But Robert started showing signs early. He'd dissect animals, not in that curious kid way, in that slow, methodical, I wonder what happens when I do this way. He'd lie about everything, even stuff that didn't matter. He'd steal from stores even though he could buy the whole damn store if he wanted. Teachers called him troubled. Other kids called him creepy. His father just called him disappointing. By the time he hit his 20s, Robert was the family black sheep. While Douglas was learning how to run the empire, Robert was getting kicked out of UCLA for God knows what. He'd show up to family events high or drunk, or both. He'd bring home girls that made his father's skin crawl, not because they were from the wrong side of tracks, but because there was something off about them. Broken people attract broken people, you know. Then, in 1971, something weird happened. Robert announced he was moving to Vermont. Not to one of those fancy ski resorts where rich folks go, but to Middlebury, this nothing little town where nobody knew the Durst name. He opened a health food store called All Good Things. Yeah, a billionaire's son selling granola and carrot juice. Go figure. But here's the thing. For a minute there, it looked like maybe Vermont was gonna save Robert Durst. He seemed calmer, happier, even he was dating local girls, hanging out with hippies, pretending to be just another dropout from the straight world. And then Kathy McCormack walked into his store. The girl who should have run Love, Lies, and the beginning of the end. Kathleen McCormack was everything Robert Durst wasn't. She came from a big Irish Catholic family in New Hyde Park, the kind where Sunday dinner was sacred and everybody knew everybody's business. Her dad was a roofer, her mom kept house, and raised 5 kids on a working man's salary. They weren't poor, but they sure as hell weren't rich. Kathy was the golden child. Smart as a whip, pretty as a picture, and ambitious as hell. She was working her way through Western Connecticut State University, then planning on medical school. She wanted to be a pediatrician, help kids, save lives, make her family proud. The day she walked into All Good Things in 1971, she was just looking for some vitamins. What she found was Robert Durst, playing the role of the charming, mysterious store owner. He didn't mention the family money at first, didn't mention the mansion in Scarsdale or the buildings in Manhattan. He was just Bob, the quiet guy who knew everything about organic produce. Their courtship was like something out of a movie. He'd take her on long drives through the Vermont countryside. They'd stay up all night talking philosophy and smoking weed. He seemed sensitive, different from the meathead guys she'd grown up with. He listened to her dreams about becoming a doctor. He told her she was brilliant, beautiful, perfect. They got married in 1973, on Robert's 30th birthday. Small ceremony. Kathy wore a simple white dress and flowers in her hair. Robert wore a suit that probably cost more than her dad made in a month, but nobody noticed at the time. They looked happy. Hell, they probably were happy for about 5 minutes. Y'all seeing the pattern here? The charm, the lies, the slow reveal of who Robert really was. This is textbook predator behavior. If you're digging this deep dive into the mind of a killer, smash that like button for Justice System USA now. Let's see how paradise turned into a nightmare. The first crack appeared when Robert decided we should move back to New York. Suddenly, the hippie health food store owner was gone, replaced by a Durst heir with family obligations. They moved into a penthouse on Riverside Drive, the kind of place where the doorman called you sir and the elevator was bigger than Kathy's childhood bedroom. Kathy enrolled at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. She was going to be a doctor, just like she'd always dreamed. But Robert started changing, or maybe he stopped pretending. Hard to tell which. He'd get drunk and mean. He'd accuse her of cheating with her study partners. He'd show up at her school and make scenes. When she got good grades, he'd say the professors only passed her because she was pretty. When she made friends, he'd find ways to drive them away. The violence started small. A grabbed wrist that left bruises, a shove that sent her into a wall. Then it got worse. Way worse. January 1981. Kathy shows up at her friend Gilberta Najami's house with her face all messed up. Black eye, split lip, bruises on her neck like someone tried to strangle her. She tells Gilberta that Robert went crazy, that he accused her of having an abortion behind his back, that he threw her around their apartment like a rag doll. "You gotta leave him," Gilberta said. "With what money?" Kathy replied. "He controls everything. The apartment's in his name. The car's in his name. He even monitors my credit cards." This is the trap of marrying money, folks. When everything belongs to them, where do you run? But Kathy was tough. Tougher than Robert gave her credit for. She started making plans. Secret plans. She was going to graduate medical school, get her residency, save enough money to disappear. She told friends she was going to divorce him and take him for everything she could get. She knew about some shady stuff the Durst organization was into. Mob connections, tax evasion, the kind of dirt that could bring down an empire. Robert must have sensed something, cause the violence escalated. He'd choke her until she passed out. He'd threatened to kill her if she left. He killed their dog. Yeah, you heard that right. Killed their damn dog and told her she was next if she didn't behave. The last time Gilberta saw Kathy was January 29, 1982, 2 days before she disappeared. Kathy showed up with more bruises, but this time she was different, calm, determined. "I'm done," she told Gilberta. "I'm leaving him. I've got a meeting with a divorce lawyer next week." She never made it to that meeting. The night she vanished, a dinner party, a train station, and a lie that lasted 40 years. January 31st, 1982. Super Bowl Sunday. The 49ers had just beaten the Bengals. Most of America was drunk and happy, but at the Durst cottage in South Salem, New York, something dark was brewing. Robert and Kathy had invited their friends, Peter Schwartz and his wife, over for dinner. According to the Schwartzes, the whole evening was tense as hell. Robert barely spoke, just sat there drinking wine and staring at Kathy. Kathy was trying to keep things normal, talking about her classes, her upcoming exams, but you could feel the anger radiating off Robert like heat. Around 7 p.m., Kathy said she needed to get back to the city. She had an early class Monday morning, a crucial pediatrics exam she'd been studying for a week. Robert offered to drive her to the train station. The Schwartzes watched them leave, Kathy in the passenger seat, Robert behind the wheel of his Mercedes. Thought that was the last time anyone except Robert saw Kathy. Durst alive. Here's Robert's version of events. He drove Kathy to the Katona train station. She got on the 9:17 train to Manhattan. He went home later that night. Around 11 p.m., she called him from their Riverside Drive apartment. They argued. She said she was going out for a drink with a friend. He never saw her again. Sounds reasonable, right? Except it's bullshit. Complete and utter bullshit. First problem, nobody at the train station saw Kathy that night. The station was tiny, one platform, one ticket window. The ticket agent knew Kathy by sight. He didn't see her. Second problem, the doorman at their Manhattan building, a guy named Eddie Lopez who'd worked there for 15 years, never saw Kathy come home. This is a building where you can't sneeze without the doorman knowing about it. Eddie was on duty until midnight. No Kathy. Third problem, the phone call. Robert said Kathy called him at 11 p.m. But phone records, remember, this is 1982. Everything went through landlines, showed no call from the Manhattan apartment to the South Salem house that night. But here's the kicker. Robert didn't report Kathy missing for 5 days. 5 fucking days. During those 5 days, he did some interesting things. He called Albert Einstein Medical School and told them Kathy was sick with the flu. He went to their Manhattan apartment and got rid of stuff, clothes, books, personal items. He hired a criminal defense attorney, not a missing persons expert, a criminal defense attorney, before he even called the cops. When he finally did report her missing on February 5th, he acted surprised when the cops wanted to search the South Salem house. "Why would you search here?" he asked. "She disappeared from Manhattan." The detective, a guy named Mike Struck, knew something was off. But what could he do? No body, no blood, no witnesses, just a rich guy with a missing wife and a story that didn't quite add up. This is where the case goes cold for 18 years. But justice has a way of circling back, doesn't it? Keep watching Justice System USA to see how the past caught up with Robert Durst. And if you're learning something new, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. The investigation went nowhere fast. Robert hired private investigators not to find Kathy, but to spread rumors about her. They told reporters she was a cocaine addict. They said she'd been having affairs. They claimed she'd run off with another man, maybe to Europe. Meanwhile, Kathy's family was going crazy. Her brother Jim McCormack knew something had happened to her. Kathy would never just disappear. She was about to graduate medical school. She was close to her family. She had plans, dreams, a future. But the Dursts had power, the McCormacks didn't. They had connections in the NYPD, the DAS office, the media. The case got buried. Kathy became just another missing person. Another cold case file gathering dust. Robert filed for divorce in 1986, claiming abandonment. He got it. In the eyes of the law, Kathy had simply walked away from her life. Case closed. But secrets have a way of not staying buried. And Robert Durst was about to learn that some ghosts don't rest easy. The friend who knew too much, Susan Berman, Daddy's little mob princess, and her fatal loyalty to understand why Susan Berman had to die. You gotta understand who she was and why she mattered to Robert Durst. Susan was born in 1945 in Minneapolis, but her real story starts in Las Vegas. Her father was David "Davy" Berman, one of the most powerful Jewish mobsters in America. Davy ran the Flamingo Hotel after Bugsy Siegel got whacked. He was partners with Meyer Lansky. He had the kind of power where people disappeared when he snapped his fingers. But Davy loved his little girl more than life itself. Susan grew up in a Vegas that doesn't exist anymore. The Vegas of the Rat Pack and mobsters in sharp suits and showgirls who knew how to keep secrets. She went to the best schools, wore the best clothes. But she also learned early that loyalty was everything and snitches got stitches. When Davy died in 1957, during surgery though, some say it wasn't exactly natural causes. Susan was 12. Her mother, a fragile woman who couldn't handle life without Davy's protection, killed herself 3 years later. At 15, Susan was an orphan with a trust fund and a head full of secrets about how Vegas really worked. She bounced around relatives, went to UCLA, tried to become a writer. She wrote a memoir about growing up mob royalty called Easy Street that got some attention. She moved to New York in the 70s, part of that whole Studio 54 crowd, artists, writers, actors, and various beautiful disasters. That's when she met Robert Durst. They clicked immediately. To damaged people who understood each other's darkness. Susan didn't judge Robert for being the weird Durst kid. Robert didn't judge Susan for her mob connections. They'd stay up all night doing coke and talking about their dead parents, their trust issues, their shared sense that they were different from everyone else. When Robert married Kathy, Suzanne was one of the few people he stayed close to. She was at their wedding. She'd visit them in Vermont. And most importantly, she was there when Kathy disappeared. Here's what we know for sure. After Kathy vanished, Susan called Albert Einstein Medical School. She told them she was Kathy and that she was sick. This gave Robert cover for those crucial first days. Why would Susan do this? Loyalty. The same loyalty her father taught her. You protect your friends, no matter what. For years, Susan kept Robert's secrets, even as her life fell apart. Failed marriages, failed writing career, mounting debts. She never said a word about what she knew. Robert would send her money when she was broke. $25,000 here, $50,000 there. Not loans, gifts, hush money, maybe. Or maybe just one damaged friend helping another. Asterisk by 2000. Susan was living in a modest house in Benedict Canyon, surviving on Robert's occasional checks and whatever freelance writing she could get. She was working on a new project, a TV series about her mob childhood. She needed money bad. Then everything changed. We're about to see how loyalty became Susan's death sentence. This is where our story takes a turn toward darkness that'll chill you to the bone. Stick with Justice System USA as we uncover what happened in that Benedict Canyon house. In 1999, the new Westchester County DA Janine Pirro announced she was reopening the Kathy Durst case. Pirro was ambitious, media, and she saw the Durst case as her ticket to bigger things. She assigned her best investigators to dig into everything, interview old witnesses, review phone records, follow the money, and Susan Berman's name kept coming up. The investigators realized Susan had been in New York when Kathy disappeared. They found records of phone calls between Susan and Robert in those crucial days after. They discovered the fake call to the medical school. Susan wasn't just a witness, she was potentially an accessory after the fact. On December 2000, investigators reached out to Susan's lawyer. They wanted to talk to her. They were prepared to offer her immunity if she cooperated. The meeting was scheduled for early January 2001. Susan was terrified. She called friends, told them she was afraid of Robert, but she also said something interesting. I know things that could destroy him, but I can't. I just can't. December 23, 2000, 2 days before Christmas, Susan's neighbor noticed her door had been open all day. Her 3 dogs were running around the neighborhood. The neighbor went to check. Susan was lying face down in her bedroom. There was a single bullet wound in the back of her head, execution style. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. Her purse was still on the table. Nothing was stolen. The killer had sent a note to the Beverly Hills Police Department with Susan's address and the word cadaver printed in block letters. But here's the weird part. They'd spelled Beverly Hills as Beverly with an extra E dot. When police searched Susan's house, they found something interesting. Years earlier, Robert had sent Susan a letter. In it, he'd written Beverly Hills the exact same way. Beverly with an extra E, same handwriting, same weird spelling mistake. But where was Robert when Susan died? That's where things get really interesting. Records showed he'd flown from New York to San Francisco on December 22. He checked into a hotel under the name Morris Black. Remember that name? It's gonna matter later. He rented a car. The drive from San Francisco to LA takes about 6 hours. On December 24th, the day after Susan's murder, Robert was back in New York. He showed up at his brother Douglas's Christmas Eve party like nothing had happened. When someone mentioned Susan's death a few days later, Robert acted shocked. Susan dead? How terrible. But here's what sealed it for investigators. Susan had told several friends that if anything happened to her, they should look at Robert. She'd even written a letter, never sent, that said, "If I die, Robert Durst killed me." The problem: without a confession, without physical evidence, without something concrete, they couldn't arrest him. Robert had learned from Kathy's disappearance. No body meant no case. And while Susan's body was found, there was no physical evidence linking Robert to the scene, so Robert walked free again. But he was spooked now. He knew the walls were closing in. He needed to disappear. The crossdresser of Galveston when running from murder means becoming Dorothy. Y'all ain't ready for this part. This is where our story goes from dark to absolutely batshit insane. After Susan's murder, Robert went underground, but not in the way you'd expect a millionaire to hide. No private island, no Swiss chalet, no yacht in international waters. Nope. Robert Durst decided to hide in Galveston, Texas, dressed as a mute woman named Dorothy Siner. I need you to picture this: a 57-year-old millionaire, heir to one of New York's biggest fortunes, living in a $300 a month rooming house, wearing cheap wigs and house dresses, pretending to be a deaf-mute woman. This ain't fiction, folks. This is what happened. The rooming house at 2213 Avenue K was the kind of place where nobody asked questions. You paid your rent in cash, you kept to yourself, and everybody minded their own business. It was full of drifters, ex-cons, people running from something. Perfect place for Robert to disappear. He'd go out dressed as Dorothy, floral dress, sensible shoes, bad wig, no makeup. He'd shop at the local grocery store, communicating with notes. Dorothy was quiet, kept to herself, never caused trouble, but Robert couldn't keep the act up 24/7. Sometimes he'd go out as himself, Robert Durst, quirky old man. That's how he met Morris Black. Morris Black was 71, cantankerous as hell, and lived across the hall from Dorothy. He was the kind of guy who'd lived hard and had the scars to prove it. Former merchant marine, been married 4 times, estranged from his family. He collected guns and read Soldier of Fortune magazines. Not the kind of guy you'd want as an enemy. Somehow, Robert and Morris became, well, not friends exactly, but something. They'd watch TV together, argue about politics. Maurice would borrow money from Robert and never pay it back. It was weird, but everything about this situation was weird. Before we get to what happened next, let me remind you that you're watching Justice System USA, where we bring you the most insane true crime stories in American history. If you think this is crazy, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started with the madness. September 28, 2001, 17 days after 9/11, when the whole country was distracted by terrorism and war, A perfect time for murder. According to Robert's later testimony, and remember, this is his version, Morris came to his apartment with a gun. They struggled. The gun went off. Morris was dead, shot in the face. Now, a normal person would call 911, right? Claim self-defense, call the cops, deal with it legally. But Robert Durst ain't normal. Here's what he did instead. He went to Walmart and bought a bow saw, garbage bags, and drop cloths. He came back to the apartment and proceeded to dismember Morris Black's body. Cut off the arms, the legs, the head. He wrapped the parts in garbage bags, drove to Galveston Bay, and dumped them in the water. Except he made one mistake. The garbage bags he used were the cheap kind. They floated. September 30th, 2001, a kid fishing in Galveston Bay sees something floating. It's a human torso, then an arm, then legs. The cops start dragging the bay and find everything except the head. The head never turned up. It doesn't take long to ID the body as Morris Black. And it takes even less time to connect him to the weird guy in apartment to be who suddenly disappeared. When cops search Robert's apartment, they find blood everywhere. On the walls, the floor, soaked into the carpet. They find a receipt for the bow saw. They find Morris's blood on Robert's boots, and they find something else, a bunch of documents with different names. Robert Durst, Dorothy Siner, and others. Nationwide manhunt begins. Robert's face is on every news channel. Millionaire fugitive suspected of murder. The story is so crazy that even hardened cops can't believe it. But Robert's already gone. He's stolen Morris's identity, that's why. They were hanging out. Robert was learning Morris's personal details. He's got Maurice's driver's license, social security number, even his Medicaid card. 6 weeks later, November 30th, 2001, a shoplifter gets caught at a Wegmans supermarket in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. The security guard notices something weird about this guy. He's stealing a sandwich and some band-aids, but he's got $500 in his wallet. They run his ID, Morris Black, but Morris Black is dead, floating in pieces in Galveston Bay. They look closer at the shoplifter. It's Robert Durst, millionaire fugitive, stealing a $6 sandwich when they arrest him. They find $37,000 in cash in his car, plus 2 guns, ammunition, and a fake driver's license. He'd been on the run for 6 weeks, and he got caught stealing a sandwich he could have bought 1,000 times over. This is the thing about Robert Durst. His arrogance always betrayed him. He couldn't help himself. Even when he was running for his life, he had to steal, had to break rules, had to prove he was smarter than everyone else. The trial that broke Texas, how to convince 12 people that dismemberment is no big deal. The trial of Robert Durst was one of the most bizarre spectacles in American legal history. Here's a man who admitted to chopping up a human body, and his lawyer was going to argue he wasn't guilty of murder. In Texas, where they execute people for way less than this. But Robert had something most defendants don't have: unlimited money and dictagurin. Dictagurin was a legend in Texas legal circles. This is the lawyer who defended David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. He'd gotten millionaires off murder charges before. He knew every trick, every angle, every way to create reasonable doubt. And at $1,200 an hour, he better. The trial started in September 2003. The prosecution, led by Kurt Sisterunk, thought they had a slam dunk. They had Robert's admission that he dismembered Morris Black, blood evidence everywhere, the bow saw receipt. Robert's history of violence, though the judge wouldn't let them mention Kathy or Susan, his attempt to flee his fake identities. How the hell do you defend against that? Duggan's strategy was brilliant and completely insane. He put Robert on the stand. For 9 days, Robert testified. 9 days. He talked about his terrible childhood, his mother's death, his struggles with Asperger's, syndrome, which he may or may not have had. He admitted to everything except the actual murder. I did not knowingly, purposely, intentionally kill Morris Black, he said, looking straight at the jury. Morris Black was my friend. He was shot in the struggle. It was an accident. But here's where it gets wild. The prosecutor asks him, so what did you do after this accident? And Robert, calm as can be, describes cutting up a human body like he's giving a recipe for pot roast. I used the bow saw to separate the limbs. It was harder than I expected. The bone was very dense. I had to take breaks. The jury is sitting there, horrified, and Robert's just talking like this is normal. Like everyone would dismember a body after an accidental shooting. Why didn't you call the police? The prosecutor asks. I panicked, Robert says. I've been suspected of killing my wife for 20 years. Who would believe this was an accident? This testimony was so insane that court TV had its highest ratings ever. America couldn't believe what they were watching. Neither could the jury. Keep watching Justice System USA to find out how this absolutely bonkers defense actually worked. The masterpiece was the recreation of the struggle. He brought in a mannequin, had Robert demonstrate how the fight happened. Robert, this frail-looking old man, showing how he wrestled the gun away from Maurice. It was theater, pure and simple, but it was effective theater. The prosecution made mistakes too. They couldn't prove who shot Maurice because the head was missing. No head meant no bullet trajectory, no powder burns, No way to prove it wasn't self-defense. They'd charged Robert with murder, not manslaughter. So the jury had to believe he intentionally killed Maurice. The jury deliberated for 5 days. 5 days they asked to see evidence again and again. They were clearly struggling. November 11, 2003. The verdict comes in. We the jury find the defendant, Robert Durst, not guilty of murder. The courtroom exploded. Reporters ran for the exits to file their stories. The prosecution sat there, stunned. Morris Black's family was crying, and Robert Durst, he smiled, a little smirk that said, "I told you I'd beat this." But he wasn't walking free. He still had the bail jumping charge and the evidence tampering charge. Judge Susan Chris, who'd watched this whole circus, sentenced him to 5 years for those charges with time served and good behavior. He'd be out in 3. The jurors talked to the media afterward. One said, "We couldn't convict him of murder beyond a reasonable doubt. The state just didn't prove it." Another said, "The dismemberment was horrible, but that doesn't make him a murderer." This is the American justice system, folks. A man can admit to cutting up a body and dumping it in the ocean. And if you can't prove the actual killing was intentional, he walks on the murder charge. The Jinx, When Ego Meets HBO, the documentary that became a confession tape after getting out of prison in 2005. Robert Durst tried to lay low. He settled in Houston, got married to a woman named Deborah Lee Sheraton, a whole other weird story, and tried to pretend he was just a normal rich retiree. But Robert couldn't help himself. He needed attention. He needed people to know how smart he was, how he'd outsmarted everyone. That's what made him agree to talk to filmmaker Andrew Uretsky. Uretsky had made a movie in 2010 called All Good Things starring Ryan Gosling, loosely based on Robert's life. Robert watched it and loved it. He thought it was sympathetic to him, showed his side of the story. So when Uretsky approached him about doing a documentary, Robert said yes. This was the worst decision Robert Durst ever made. And that's saying something. The documentary, called The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst, was going to be 6 episodes on HBO. Robert sat for over 20 hours of interviews. He showed Uretsky documents, photos, personal items. He walked him through his life story, his version of events. 4 or 5 episodes. It was fascinating but not necessarily damning. Robert was weird. Sure, he had these creepy burps, these long blinks, this way of talking that made your skin crawl. But he stuck to his story. Kathy ran away. Susan was killed by someone else. Maurice was self-defense, but Uretsky had been doing his own investigation. His team had found something huge. Remember, that cadaver note sent to police after Susan's murder, the one with Beverly misspelled. Uretsky's team found another letter Robert had written to Susan years before. It was an invitation to a dinner party. The handwriting was identical, and Beverly Hills was spelled Beverly the exact same. Misspelling. In the final interview, episode 6, Uretsky confronts Robert with this evidence. He puts both documents in front of him. "Can you tell which one you wrote?" Uretsky asks. Robert stares at them. His face goes through about 10 different expressions. He burps his nervous tick. He blinks those long, creepy blinks. "I wrote this one," he says, pointing to the letter. "But I couldn't have written the cadaver note because I wasn't in California then." Except he was. Uretsky had the receipts, the hotel records, everything. Robert asks for a break. He goes to the bathroom, still wearing his live microphone, and then, alone in that bathroom thinking he's off camera, he has a conversation with himself that will go down in criminal justice history. ***, what happens next is the most insane cell phone in criminal history. This is why you're watching Justice System USA, for moments like this that you couldn't make up if you tried. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? ***, here's the full transcript of what Robert said in that bathroom. There it is. You're caught. You're right, of course, but you can't imagine. Arrest him. I don't know what's in the house. Oh, I want this. What a disaster. He was right. I was wrong. And the burping. I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do?